Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mapp and Lucia book club series that we are going to be doing here on the Daily Connoisseur. I'm so excited to be starting off with the first book in the series called Queen Lucia. The books are by E.F. Benson, and the way I'm planning on doing these book clubs is like this. I'm going to discuss Queen Lucia in this video. In the next video, I'm going to be discussing Miss Mapp, Book 2. And then as a third wrap-up video, I'm going to be discussing your comments, your observations, what I think about them, and how they relate to both books. So I hope that this is fun. This is not going to be an in-depth, laborious study of these books. You know, it's the summertime. These books are a bit of frivolity, and hopefully they've provided you with a lot of laughter and just an escapism. So I just want an easygoing, fun book club where we can discuss the funnier aspects of these books and how they relate to life. So you know I'm a mom of 3, and it's really hard to do videos when you have 3 children around the house. So, and my husband's actually out of town as I shoot this video. By the time you see it, he will be back, but he's been out of town. So right now I have the girls watching VeggieTales, so pretty much the only time they watch TV is when I'm shooting my videos, because that's the only way I can keep them really out of the shot. And my baby is having his nap. So when I'm shooting these videos, I always have this sense of urgency. I would love to just sit down in an armchair and just relax and talk with you for ages about these books, but I just feel like at any moment I'm going to be interrupted. So that's just kind of a funny backstory, and I hope that I don't miss anything. I feel a bit frenzied, you know? So a few fun facts about E.F. Benson. I am a super fan of his. I think his work is so witty and funny, and just, it's so sharp, and some people don't get it, but I think most people do. And a lot of people wrote and said, oh, they were too boring, they were too slow, but I think that's just because we have been I don't know, I think our attention spans have become shorter as time goes on, and we're looking for more action-packed books. These books are more observations of societal differences, of cultures, of things like that. And it does take a certain attention span to keep up with them. I have to say that Queen Lucia, of the 2 books, I actually prefer the book of Miss Mapp. We'll get into that later. But basically, I am a huge fan of E.F. Benson, and a few fun facts is that, you know, he's an English author. My husband went to a place called Wellington College, and E.F. Benson also did, and his father was the headmaster there, which is an interesting fun fact. And another fun fact is that 2 of my children have names or nicknames that are inspired by E.F. Benson. So that is how much I really love E.F. Benson and his writings. He's truly one of my favorites. Okay, so the Queen Lucia and Miss Mapp books. This is a series that is truly a comedy of manners. And right off the bat, I just have to make the observation that Lucia, so her name is Emmeline Lucas, and she lives in the fictional town of Rhythm with her husband. They have no children, and this is a small town in England. It's a fictional town. But she lives in Rhythm, and she is the self-proclaimed queen of Rhythm. She thinks very highly of herself. And I absolutely find a comparison between Lucia and Hyacinth Bouquet from Keeping Up Appearances. And it's the sort of first modern comparison that I could make. Now, for those of you who've never seen Keeping Up Appearances, it's a television show, an English television show. It's not a new one, it's back from the 90s, I believe. And it's just so funny. It's about a woman called Hyacinth Bouquet, and she is constantly trying to keep up appearances. Hyacinth is always trying to appear very elegant and poised and high class, and they're both lovers of the arts. There's so many things to compare them with, and it's just so funny. It's just a recipe for hilarity, I think. Because in these books, you just constantly see people who care so much about what other people think of them that they end up getting into these crazy situations, which is, of course, a moral story that we could all learn from. Let's discuss Queen Lucia. And I think that the first thing we should do is discuss some of the key players in this book. Okay, so of course we have Lucia, and Lucia is her nickname. Her real name is Emmeline Lucas. So she's married to her husband, Mr. Lucas, she affectionately refers to him as Peppino. And they are obsessed with the Italian culture. They love to pretend like they speak Italian, and they have little phrases that they say to each other. So she calls him Peppino, and he calls her Lucia, or wife of Lucas. And she is a self-proclaimed queen of Rism. So she thinks very highly of herself. Of course, we have Georgie Pilson, who is my favorite character in those books. He is Lucia's best friend, and he's very foppish. He really cares what he looks like, about his appearance, his hair, his clothes, his house, the way it looks, his little collections of things. And Georgie is Lucia's best friend in that they both share a love for the arts. They will often play piano duets together, and she's just, they're like partners in crime. Now, something happens with their relationship down the line in the books that we're not discussing today. But, you know, keep an eye on that character because his character really develops as the series goes on. Okay, so we have Peppino, or Mr. Lucas, and he is Lucia's very patient husband. We have Daisy Quantock, who's Georgie Pilson's neighbor, and she would love to overthrow Lucia as the queen of Rism, but she doesn't quite. And of course there's Olga Bracely, the operatic diva, who truly is a queen as far as these things go. In this little town, people, you know, really fawn at her because she is a celebrity, and she truly is an artist as well because she is an operatic singer. So those are some of the main characters that we see. Of course, there are side characters like Hermie and Ursi, Georgie's sisters, and there are other characters such as the Guru, the Princess Popovsky. Right off the bat, in the first paragraph, Lucia is scheming about how she can get others to talk about her, how she can stay relevant. So it says in chapter 1, that would be an interesting thing for them. It would cause one of those little thrills of pleasant excitement and conjectural exercise, which supplied Rism with its emotional daily bread. They would all wonder what had happened to her, whether she had been taken ill at the very last moment before leaving town, and with her well-known fortitude and consideration for the feelings of others, had sent her maid on to assure her husband that he need not be anxious. So this is discussing about how Lucia is coming back into Rism after being away, and she sends her maid off with her luggage so that the people would see the maid and not see her, so that they would start to talk about her. We're just getting an idea of her character here. And it's funny because Lucia is constantly reinventing herself and doing things to stay relevant. And I wrote a little note here saying that this absolutely goes on today. I mean, you see this with celebrities all the time. They're constantly reinventing themselves, constantly trying to shock people, constantly trying to stay relevant. I look at it as majorly desperate. I do see why they do it. It's to stay in the news, to keep selling, you know, whatever it is that they sell. So yes, I say in my note here that this goes on today, but in a crasser sense. Celebrities try to stay relevant by shock factor, and back then, it was by an air of mystery. So Lucia was really trying to stay relevant by making people wonder about her, where she was. And today, celebrities have this shock factor of staying relevant by posting like a tacky image of themselves on Instagram, or by doing something shocking, doing some shocking behavior or something like that. So that is a huge difference that you will see between these books and what happens today. There is nothing new under the sun. So people are still acting for the same reasons that they do in this book today, but they do it in a much less classy way, a less tasteful way. Lucia does things with an art always about her, and she's constantly trying to have an air of mystery and be the first. So that is a funny difference between back then and today. Lucia is a lover of the arts, and so back then that was a bit of a status symbol. Now people aren't so interested in fine arts, you know, like fine paintings, fine music, like classical music. Those things are kind of going by the wayside. Now people are more interested in pop music, movies, things like that. But I wrote here on my book a little hashtag, seek out the arts. And I underlined the passage, just as the painter Rubens amused himself with being the ambassador to the court of St. James's, a sufficient career in itself for most busy men, so Mrs. Lucas amused herself in the intervals of her pursuit of art for art's sake, with being only not an ambassador, but a monarch. So Lucia lives in a house that she calls the Hearst, and she's labeled several of her rooms after Shakespeare's plays. She loves playing Beethoven on the piano, the Moonlight Sonata, and there's a funny line in the book about how she only plays the first part of Moonlight Sonata because the next part is just a bit too fast for her, for her liking. But of course it gets more difficult as you play it. She really does think of herself as the Queen of Rhythm, as you can see in this little paragraph here that says, something of the consciousness of her sovereignty was in her mind as she turned the last hot corner of the road and came in sight of the village street that constituted her kingdom. Indeed, it belonged to her, as treasure troves belong to the crown, for it was she who had been the first to begin the transformation of this remote Elizabethan village into a place of culture that was now reared upon the spot where 10 years ago an agricultural population had led bovine and unilluminated lives in their cottages of gray stone or brick or timber. So she really takes responsibility for creating the social scene in Rhythm, for introducing the arts to Rhythm, and it so reminds me of Hyacinth Bouquet and her candlelight suppers, and constantly trying to get into the church plays and things like that. So she and Hyacinth both just love the arts and really take responsibility for bringing the arts to their respective little towns. Okay, so there are two major events really that happen in the books, and the first one is the introduction of the guru. Now, the guru is someone that Daisy Quantock found, and he comes to the town and he sort of introduces this entire town to the concept of yoga and meditation and spiritual practices, things like that that they weren't privy to before. And so Lucia doesn't really care about these things. She just is a bit jealous that Daisy Quantock is the person who introduced the guru to the town of Rhythm. And Lucia wants to be the one who is responsible for that. So she wants to be the one to introduce the guru to everybody. She wants to be the one who has the yoga classes at her house. She's not particularly interested in the subject, it's just that she wants to be ahead of the trends. So you can see this again in modern day, with people just wanting to be at the head of the trends. They want to be the trendsetters, they want to be the ones who are responsible for bringing it in. And whether or not they're that interested in the subject is yet to be seen. Now, if you haven't read the books yet, this video will contain spoilers about what happens in the book. So if you want to pause it here and just watch it after you've read the books, you can do that now. Basically, there are two people. There's the guru, and there's also the Princess Popovsky, who come into this town, and they kind of take them all for a ride. The guru ends up being a curry cook at an Indian restaurant, and so Georgie Pilson's sisters, Hermie and Ursi, recognized him. And they figure this out, unfortunately too late, because the guru actually ends up being a thief, and he steals all of their goods, basically. All of their belongings, their expensive things. And so the guru really took them for a ride. And I'll get back to the guru in a moment, but there's also the Princess Popovsky, who's doing all these psychic things and table turning and all of this dark stuff that they're getting into. So the Princess Popovsky is also an imposter. So basically, everyone in the town of Rhythm, they just constantly keep getting taken advantage of. And I have my thoughts on that. So I did have a reader who wrote to me and said she was disappointed that I chose this book because of these kind of occultish things that they talk about in Queen Lucia. And I can understand if that makes people uncomfortable. But as I wrote to her, I said, if you read the entire book, you see what E.F. Benson is doing here. This is a satire. And the point is that the people in the town of Rhythm are so concerned with keeping up appearances, about what they look like to others, about all of these unimportant things, right? That they are easily taken advantage of. you can see that today. So in places like where I live in Los Angeles or in New York, in certain places where people are very image conscious, right? And I think Los Angeles maybe could be the most image conscious place on the planet. So I'm just around that environment here where people are so image conscious. You will see people doing crazy things in this town, spending all sorts of money, doing all sorts of wild things like certain beauty treatments, you know, all sorts of activities that you don't really see the rest of the world doing. And it's because they can get away with it here. These people who do these things can get away with it because people care so much about their image, about what they look like, about these things that they can easily get had. This reminds me, of course, of the emperor's new clothes. The emperor cares so much about what other people think of him that the tailor was able to sell him an invisible suit that only certain people would be able to see. And the emperor really bought that, hook, line, and sinker. So this also has happened with the people of Rizm. So it's a really good lesson that you should not be so concerned about what other people think of you, more so than just really truly living your life honestly and investigating what you're truly interested in. They were not interested in everything that the guru taught them or the Princess Popovsky was showing them. And you can tell that because immediately after they found out that both of these people were imposters and a thief in the case of the guru, they decided that they were no longer interested. However, they wanted to keep up their appearances, so they continued to do the classes and they decided, oh, we'll just let it peter out after a while so that people don't know that we've been taken advantage of. So they're clearly not interested in anything that they're talking about. They just don't want to look like fools. So they keep on just sort of doing what they said, but they're just going to stop it eventually, which proves that they were never interested in it in the first place. That one of the funny moments was that even when the residents are suffering, they're concerned about how they look. And for example, Georgie Pilson is secretly pleased that he has suffered the greatest loss from the theft of the guru. So here it is on page 138 of this book. It says, this is when he discovers the theft. It says, his glass case of treasures was not only open, but empty. Gone was the Louis XVI snuff box. Gone was the miniature of Karl Hirth. Gone the piece of Beau china, and gone the Fabergé cigarette case. Only the Queen Anne toy porringer was there, and in the absence of the others, it looked to him as no doubt it had looked to the burglar, indescribably insignificant. So it goes on, and everybody comes in to say what they have had taken from them. And Lucia tells Georgie that they had 100 pounds in banknotes stolen, and her Roman pearls. And it says at the bottom, Georgie felt a certain pride of achievement. And he felt this, says, I have been burgled too. My Louis XVI snuff box is worth more than that. And there's the piece of Beau china and the cigarette case and the Karl Hirth as well. So he's just comparing what he's lost. He's lost all of these bibelots, as he calls them, and he loves them. It goes into great detail in the book about how much he cares about these possessions, but he's secretly thrilled that he suffered the greatest loss in this theft, which I just think is so funny. They're just constantly thinking about what others think of them, trying to be the best and the most at everything. Another thing that I found was funny was that after all the fighting about the guru, about Lucia wanting to be the guru and Daisy wanting the guru to be her idea, as soon as it's discovered that the guru is an imposter and a thief, Daisy proclaims him to be Lucia's guru. So she no longer wants anything to do with him. So then after those two episodes, you know, Olga Bracely comes to town and she really threatens to throw over Lucia's throne as Queen of Rizm. And Georgie is really taken with Olga Bracely. And, you know, even though she just got married, he feels like he is in love with her, basically. But he just adores her so much and thinks that she's quite special. There was the moment where Lucia and her husband were really found out because, you know, they claim that they can speak Italian and they're constantly saying things like, oh, Giorgio mio. She calls him caro and he calls her carissima, and they're always talking in affectionate Italian language. And so it is called to their attention at Olga Bracely's that they actually don't know Italian, and they're sort of found out about that. And you feel that certain panic for Lucia. And even though Lucia can just be so despicable with her constant trying to be better than everybody else, you do feel sorry for her as well, because how many times have you in your life honestly pretended that you could do something when you actually couldn't do it? Of course, I'm human. I've done this a lot of times in my life, and I think it's just because we just want to be accepted. We want to look upon as if we're, you know, special. I remember when I was in college, I applied for a job at a costume shop in Los Angeles. I was a theater major, so I was interested in working at this costume shop and costuming plays and things like that. And I had put on my resume that I could sew, which I can sew, but I'm not that good at sewing. So I really, you know, kind of beefed up my resume. I didn't lie, I said I could sew, but my levels of sewing were not very good. And I remember thinking, oh, well, hopefully they won't have me doing much at the shop and I'll be doing other things. But it turned out that they really did need me to sew a lot. And I would just sit in sort of a panic at the sewing machine and do my best. And the owners were really nice people. And we got along so well. And I remember we would discuss things all the time and talk together and have fun. But at the end of the day, they fired me because my sewing skills were not up to par. And I really felt for Lucia when it was found out that she didn't speak Italian really, because I've done that. You know, I'm just being honest with you. I have done that before, where I have just, you know, kind of boosted up a skill, but I don't really have that skill. And I think that's just a human thing that we all do. We all want to appear that we can do certain things when we actually can't. So that really reminded me of that. And I thought that Olga Bracely handled it very well. And it shows a true sign of class when she could have really embarrassed Lucia and her husband. But instead, they said that the reason why they couldn't understand the visitor, the Italian visitor, is because he spoke a Neapolitan dialect, and that Lucia and her husband would not be expected to know that. So she really covered for them. And I thought that that was a true sign of class, to not make your guests uncomfortable. And I think it said that in the book. Thank you for joining me for this first episode of the Mapp and Lucia book club. For these episodes, I'm going to be signing off with Au reservoir, which is what they say in the town of Tilling. So until next time, au reservoir. See you next time on the Daily Connoisseur when we discuss Miss Mapp.